Welcome to the Money is Emotional podcast with Christine Luken, the financial dignity coach. In this podcast, we help you recover a positive and peaceful relationship with your personal finances. We do this by bringing together wise money management with emotional intelligence. Join us for this journey where we navigate our relationship with money as Christine Luken draws from years of experience and guest experts to help you get to the root of your money issues.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Money is Emotional podcast. I am your host, Christine Luken. Today's episode is Money Stories in Black and White. And before I introduce my guest, I do have a special announcement. Today marks the 2-year anniversary of the Money is Emotional podcast. So we're super excited about that. And for this landmark episode, I am honored to welcome my special guest and good friend, Casandra Austin-McDonald, self-mastery mentor and certified trauma awareness nervous system practitioner. Casandra has supported and guided hundreds of accomplished spiritual women, leaders, and visionaries to be more embodied in their authentic essence so that they experience the most fulfilling relationships, greater impact without hiding in plain sight, and more abundance without self-sacrificing through her private mentorship, programs, retreats, events, and online content. Casandra is also a mom to 2 adult sons, 1 birth and 1 bonus through marriage, and wife to her husband, who she refers to as the Mister online. She enjoys being out in nature, cooking authentic cultural cuisines, gardening, travel adventures, making deep, meaningful connections, and practicing Qigong anywhere she pleases. Welcome, Casandra.
Thank you, Christine, for having me.
You are so welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you. This has been a long time in the making.
Yes, it has.
Can you tell us about yourself and your unique journey with money growing up as a biracial woman?
It's interesting because it's the epitome of duality, I believe. And growing up, I was raised with both of my parents in the home, my father, who's a Black American, and my mother, who's a white Caucasian American. And very early on, I started to notice that there was a stark difference in backgrounds. The background of my dad and then the background of my mother. And I started to wonder why we were having the experience we were having in our household, because I was observing these different backgrounds. And so inside of our household, there was scarcity, survival mode, poverty. I mean, there were times where I remember as a little girl that the electricity got shut off and we were lighting candles at nighttime, or we didn't have heat and we had a gas stove and we were opening the stove to have heat and boiling water to take a bath, or the washer and dryer didn't work. And so we were going to the local laundromat to wash clothes, or washing clothes in the bathtub and then hanging them up in the house. But then when I would be around my mom's side of the family, there was a completely different experience. And there was also some trauma happening with violence and addiction. And I believe it was my dad's way of trying to cope with whatever traumas he experienced, but also with the financial experience that was happening in our household. My mom was the one that was the provider and was taking care of us. And my dad stayed home with us. And so he coped through alcohol and different drugs and eventually became very violent. So at an early age, I had experienced different types of traumas, and mainly was raised around my dad and his side of the family. But we also had interactions with my mom's side of the family. And my dad's side of the family, there was a lot of scarcity, trauma, violence, addiction. However, on my mom's side of the family, there was not any of those experiences. They were very educated and had careers and owned property and land, and some were farmers, and they traveled and went on family vacations. And very generous. And so I started to wonder, why were we having this experience when my mom came from a totally different life? And I didn't like that. I didn't like that. And it started my own survival mode patterns, because I got bullied at school because we didn't have the cool clothes. We didn't have fancy attire. And so it became quite obvious the background I was coming from, because my mom was gone at work and my dad was taking care of myself and my two younger sisters. There was three of us. We weren't really being taught about hygiene by my dad. He was pretty much in survival mode. And so sometimes I would go to school and I was a little smelly. And sometimes I went to school and I had a hole in my shoe and my clothes were not the best. And when I started getting picked on and teased by kids at school, I wondered, well, how can I avoid this? And at a very early age, started figuring out how to make my own money. And it started with me going around and starting with Girl Scouts, and would go around knocking on doors to sell candy bars and cookies, and then go around picking up cans around the neighborhood and would recycle them. And then eventually I was old enough to babysit. And then eventually I was old enough to get a job through legal means. And by the time I was in middle school, I was buying my own school clothes and school supplies just to avoid getting bullied at school. So I had a very interesting upbringing with money.
Yeah. How old were you when you had your first job outside of Girl Scouts?
My first legitimate job, I want to say I was 14 or 15, and I worked at Hardee's. That was my very first legitimate job. And then I started working 2 jobs. I always had 2 jobs at a time. And on top of that, going to school, running track. I don't know how I maintained all of that. The paradigm I had was you have to work hard to make money. And I was willing to do that. But I did not know that there was another way, because my grandmother, my mom's mom, was not having conversations with me about not just making money and managing money, but also multiplying money. And those are conversations that I discovered later in my journey.
Yeah. Well, and you had a rough time in young adult life as well. You know, I mean, I am just amazed that you graduated with a degree without a ton of student loan debt. I know you had, I think you've told me you had a little bit, but compared to a lot of people, you got through college while raising your son.
Yeah.
Like you took him to school, didn't you?
Yeah, I got pregnant with my son while I was 19. I actually had a track scholarship and I was a walk-on. And I didn't expect to run track in college because I had some injuries in high school. But when I got to college, I felt, oh man, I just loved it. I loved running. And I tried out and I had a conversation with the track coach and asked her if there was money. And I asked for a scholarship. And they gave me one. So I had a scholarship. However, I got pregnant with my son at 19. And during this time is when I started to learn that you can be as intentional and conscious as you can attempt to try to create a different life. But I started to learn about trauma. And this is when my trauma healing journey really started to have a foundation built, because I realized that I had basically attracted a replica of my dad through my son's father. And so that relationship didn't work. He was not good with money at all. And he had some other issues that was causing some dysfunction in the relationship. And because I had this awareness from my grandmother, my mom's mom, about money, I knew that I would prefer a partner who has some sort of financial literacy. I knew that much. Even though my grandmother didn't really have much conversations with me about money, I was very observant as a little girl. And I observed her and my aunts and my uncle on my mom's side of the family and the partners they chose. And everyone chose partners who they could build with. And I noted that. I took a mental note and noted that mental note, okay, choose someone you can build a life with. And so when that was starting to unfold with my son's father at 19, yes, I realized that this is not working, and, had my son at 20, took him to class with me to get through my education, because I realized that I was the one that was going to have to provide for us and take care of us. And if I did not at least have a bachelor's degree, we were going to have a very difficult time, because when my mom got pregnant with me at the exact same age, she dropped out of school and she did not finish her bachelor's degree. And so I remembered that. And I remembered that I thought that's what caused so much financial hardship for her and my dad, who wasn't working, was that there was no higher education and no one owned a business. And so, their earning potential was sort of capped. And I knew that if I didn't finish my education, my son and I were going to have a very difficult life. And I was unavailable for repeating the traumas and the scarcity that I experienced as a little girl with my son. And so I took him to class with me until I was able to get him into one of the university daycares. And then I started working part-time at that daycare so I could get a discount for his daycare fees. And I finished my education. I did have to get student loans, and I was resentful about that, because later I found out that my grandmother paid for school for my younger cousin, who does not look like me. And I wondered why I had to get loans and he didn't. And it built a lot of resentment over time, where I started to realize that there were two different experiences that were being had between the two different cultures, and that my dad and his side of the family, all they could teach me was how to survive. However, my mom's side of the family knew how to thrive, and no one was telling me how to thrive. And I started to feel very resentful about that, and resentful about money, and didn't even realize that I was starting to develop these unconscious beliefs that I don't want to be like my grandmother. I don't want to be like her side of the family, because there's some racism. They're very conservative, and they have their beliefs and their thoughts about how things should be. And I never felt like I fit into that equation. And I started to associate money with them. And so it created a turbulent relationship with money for me.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Dare to enter the Wealthy Woman Book Club, where answers exist to forbidden questions, where women of all ages and income secretly gather, where knowledge is shared, where possibilities are explored, where women claim their power. Dare to stay a spell in the Wealthy Woman Book Club. In this place, we lift each other up. In this place, we start dreaming again. In this place, we see financial miracles. In this place, we grow through the glory and the failure. In this place, we step into a new identity. Dare to champion the Wealthy Woman Book Club. We're creating a future where women are financially empowered across the globe. We're creating a future where our daughters stand on equal financial footing with our sons. We're creating a future where we purchase with our principles rather than price tags. We're creating a future where we use the power of money for the benefit of people and the planet. Welcome to the Wealthy Woman Book Club. Dare to come in, woman. Come in. Join us at wealthywomanbookclub.com.
So here's an interesting question. What do you wish white people knew about the Black experience of money from your perspective?
Well, one disclaimer I like to make is I can't speak on behalf of all Black people, because we all have a different experience. Black
course.
Americans have a very unique experience. My husband is actually Jamaican, and I started to realize in our relationship how he had a very different experience compared to me even. And so as Black Americans, there's an experience that has been had in this country with the slavery, then the civil rights era where there was Jim Crowism. And my dad and his side of the family have very close experience still with the Jim Crowism era. My dad is from Mississippi, and I heard stories that my grandmother,
Mhm.
my dad's mom, I like to say my story reminds me of Rich Dad Poor Dad, but Rich Grandma, Poor Grandma. I just thought of that. But my
I
black
love
grandmother,
that.
my black grandmother, she used to pick cotton with my aunt on her back because that
Wow.
was how she earned money. And so
Mm.
there's a very close connection to that way of work and even slavery in my lineage. And there is
Yeah.
still a lot of resentment in that lineage, even towards white people and money. And so that
Mhm.
side, a lot of Black Americans were very spiritual people. And we built a lot of faith through that. However, somewhere we started to tangle up spirituality and it's evil to have money. And not everyone may feel that way, but I've known some of us have had that experience. And that was kind of how I was brought up, was that my mom's side of the family was racist,
Yeah.
and they were racist in part because they had
Mhm.
money, and it's evil basically to be like them. And so it does
Mm.
create a very complex relationship with money. And what I wish some white people, specifically white Americans, understood was that there's trauma that happened in the Black American experience. And epigenetics is sharing through modern science how we can carry trauma 7 to 14 generations down a bloodline. So that means that there's still experiences from slavery and Jim Crowism and the fact that my ancestors built this country and never
Mhm.
received compensation for it. Yet there are very wealthy people in this country, white Americans, who have built wealth off of my ancestors' back. And so there's this feeling in the Black community sometimes that we are behind and that there was a head start that was had with
Yeah.
white Americans. And so what can happen with that is when we feel behind, we can then get caught in this paradigm of survival mode all over again, trying to chase, trying to work harder.
Mhm.
And so what I've noticed between myself and some of my Black peers, especially Black American women, is that we will work very hard to the point of burnout. Because
Yeah.
again, the financial
Yeah.
literacy is not being taught that we don't just make money and manage money. There's a multiplication equation in this also. And so some of us are not
Right.
being
Yeah.
taught. We are not receiving financial literacy. We're learning through, the school of hard knocks. There
Mhm.
are some Black people who don't have that close of an experience like myself. There's some people who do come from affluent families. If we look at the Obamas, their children probably can't relate to my experience. So there are families that are coming
Right.
from different experiences, but just to understand that there's so much complexity when it comes to money and the Black American experience. And a lot of it does unfortunately go back to slavery and Jim Crowism and the civil rights era. And also that there are still uh, systems in place that are a
Yeah.
disadvantage for Black Americans. There's studies that are still showing that the wealth gap is still continuing to widen between the median white household and median Black household.
Yeah.
I believe they said it was in 2019 and 22. They said even though Black American wealth was raising, that the wealth gap between the median Black household and the median white household had increased by $50,000, which widened the gap to nearly $250,000. And so we're seeing that
Mm.
there's still a wealth gap. And that's part of a challenge too with, the Black
Yeah.
American community. But also there's an issue with receiving capital for those who are startups. And less than 3% of Black Americans are receiving
Absolutely.
capital. And so, it's just
Mhm.
acknowledging that there are differences, there are disadvantages, there are less opportunities for us to build wealth at the same speed, at the same rate as our white counterparts.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this in the girl math episode. where we talked about, women are only earning 82 cents on the dollar for men, and that's for white men, but that's white women versus white men. When we look at women of color, it's 58 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
And I believe I was listening to something recently about venture capital, and the number, I don't recall the statistic, but it was less than 10% of the venture capital goes to women, period. Now, I don't know what that looks like between white women and women of color, but I imagine there's a disparity there. So obviously, there is work to be done. And
Yes.
as a white woman, I am grateful to have someone like you in my life to be able to sit down and talk to me with and to us,
Yeah.
because I don't want it to be that way. I want to be part of the
Yeah.
solution, not part of the
Yes.
problem. And, you and I were having a conversation with another woman of color that we're both friends with. And she had said that there was this saying that I had never heard before. And it just like cut me in half. And she basically said, as a Black woman, I feel like I have to work twice as hard to get half as much.
Exactly. And that's going back to what I said earlier about how a lot of Black women are literally burning out just to try to keep up, but we're really not even keeping up. And it's in part because of the systems that are in place. And there's a paradigm in place also. A lot of us have been conditioned and told that you're going to have to work. I mean, I was told that. I was told that growing up, that you're going to have to work twice as hard. And I did. I worked my butt off. I was in honors classes. I was first chair clarinet. I was a track star. I mean, I was a very high performer at a very young age, and still felt like that wasn't good enough. And it does get a little discouraging at times, because that's where that self-sacrifice starts to come in, where you feel like you're self-sacrificing and not always seeing the fruit or the rewards of your labor.
Yeah. So what do you wish Black people knew about your white experience with money?
We all have money stories, for one. And I don't think I realized we all have money stories until I started to actually consciously choose to work on my own and to work on my money mindset, which was probably around the time I started dating my husband, the Mr., over a decade ago. He was the first person who actually sat down and told me about Roth IRAs and investing in the stock market. He opened up his accounts and he showed me and he explained to me, this is what this means. This is what that means. And gave me a really different viewpoint. And although the Mr. isn't white, he's, Jamaican, for me, it started to open up my eyes. And that's when I started to take an interest in, let me actually go learn more about money. And then when I would invest in courses or programs or go to seminars, and then there were white women in the room or white men in the room, and I would hear them share their money stories, their money beliefs. Some of them didn't sound too different than mine. Now, some of them were, but some of them didn't sound too different than mine. And it really opened my eyes to, okay, there's a bigger conversation about money that goes beyond demographic, race, skin color. There's something about money in general that people can relate with when it comes to what their relationship with it is. Another is not everyone's a trust fund baby. There's this misconception that every white person's a trust fund baby. I'm like, no, that's not true. Not everybody's a trust fund baby.
It is not.
And some are actually quite generous, genuinely. Now, part of my experience was my grandmother was very generous. She's still alive. She's very generous. I mean, growing up, she gave us cars. She was always giving us money and bailing us out of things growing up. However, that there was a cost to that. We were going to be the family gossip. We were going to be talked about. It's going to be thrown in your face. Everybody's going to know. And so for me, it kind of created this hyper independent of, I never want to have to call her for a dime because I never want to be the family gossip. I never want to be talked about. So it wasn't until I started to have experiences later in life with other people who had wealth where I saw they were genuine in their generosity and there wasn't them throwing it back in your face or you becoming gossip or then telling everyone that they gave you a hand or helped you out. And I had to experience that for myself because I didn't experience that through my own family. I experienced what I just shared. So knowing that there are people out there who are white and wealthy and generous, and not everybody is racist, not everybody's evil, not everyone is out to get us. We do have allies out there. I would definitely consider you an ally. You know, we've had uncomfortable conversations around race, and I appreciate that about you. And me even being here on your platform to me, you know, shows your allyship. And so for Black people to understand that there are white people out there that want to see us win and they're doing their due diligence to be a part of the solution. And we've got to do that together because, you know, I remember a conversation you and I had before where you said, you know, you've got to let me know if I say anything or do anything that's, you know, not right or over the line, because sometimes people just don't know what they don't know. And really having a perspective around moving forward and trying to coexist together in this country and breaking up all these racial lines that have divided us for so many years and really look at how can we actually build a country that all of us are thriving in and all of us benefit from and doing that together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Of course, that is the goal. So you talked about this a little bit. You and I both know that mindset work around money is never finished. And you know, when you talked about you have to work really hard, I talked about that early on in the podcast, how that was a major stumbling block for me. That was a major money mindset piece that I had to work on. And sometimes it still pops back up because there's always another layer. So, are there any mindset issues from your upbringing that you've more recently overcome? Maybe something that's come up in your business and entrepreneurship?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know I had the money-ish that I had until entrepreneurship and business, because as a single mom, and even before single mom, you know, I learned how to make my own money. I also became quite good at managing money. You know, I bought a home as a single mom and I was saving and eventually, you know, investing and things like that. But I didn't know what was always driving my behavior. And I didn't realize a lot of my drive was from survival. And through entrepreneurship, I've had to confront a lot of those survival patterns, which a lot of that also was entangled with my self-worth. And so one of the things I've been working on, which I'm grateful to be inside of your Wealthy Woman Book Club, because that's been super supportive for this, is untangling my self-worth from my bank account balances. Because I've gone through a season of my business where things got bleak and business was not up as it used to be, and started to get worried that, oh my gosh, what if I can't do this anymore? What if I have to shut it down because nothing's coming in? And I really had to confront myself during that time, because some of that was fear because I really want to thrive in my business. And some of that was my self-worth was so tangled up with my earning and the bank account balances that it was kind of getting all muddied up. So for me, it's been untangling that and really connecting with my worth in a way where I'm worthy and valuable despite my bank account balances, what I achieve, what I accomplish. And if I make a lot of money and eventually create wealth from that and achieve a lot, that's great, but that doesn't define who I am.
I think almost, I would say 98% of money mindset, faulty money mindset, a lot of it is that whole self-worth, getting those things tangled up. And I would say, with so many of my clients, that's something that we've got to work on, is untangling that financial success with the self-worth.
I was going to say a lot of my, with money and self-worth, I often felt rejected by both sides of the family.
Mm.
Like I clearly did not look like my mom and her side of the family, but my dad's side of the family are darker complected. And so there was this feeling of never fitting in, never belonging. And somewhere along the lines, and because of being bullied and teased
Mm.
by peers growing up, I think I had developed these beliefs of, well, if I make a lot of money, then people just leave me the heck alone. So it's something I had to work through, because I didn't know that those beliefs were lingering in the crevices of my unconscious, sabotaging the way that I was showing up inside of my business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. How are you teaching your sons about money? What lessons and messages do you want them to receive about money and wealth building?
Yeah, we have a lot of ongoing conversations with them, and we started talking to them about money. I mean, I was talking to my son about money at an early age. I wanted to normalize it. I didn't want it to be this foreign conversation to him like it was for me, because in our household, all I heard was fights, and there wasn't enough. And there was a lot of
Hmm.
drama between my parents with money. And then my grandmother, the white grandmother, she basically didn't teach me anything. And I had to kind of learn on my own. So just introducing them to normalizing talking about money. And we talk about, there's this quote from Stephen Covey, to begin with the end in mind. So we often talk about, don't just think about now, but also think about your future. And what is the vision that you have for your
Yeah.
life? And what is the lifestyle that you want to live? And do you see yourself having a family? Because you're, as a man, you're going to want to make sure you can provide for your family. And you need to think about these things. And how much money does it take to provide the lifestyle and for your family? We talk about these things. And then we talk about, it's not just about making money and managing it, but you also want to multiply it. So we talk about the whole spectrum. And sometimes they don't want to hear it, because my son's 21 and my bonus son's 19, but they respect the fact that, we're sitting down and we're talking with them. My son has a Roth IRA account, and I hope he's investing in there consistently, but I also try not to be a helicopter mom and so you need to do this. Yeah. But I at least want
Yes,
them to know.
there's that good balance.
Yes. I at least want them to know that they heard it from home, and it's not foreign to
Mm.
them. So that if they hear it somewhere else, we planted the seed, someone else will water it, and they can have a head start compared to, what I had.
Yeah, I love that. You and I have co-led the Treasures Beyond Your Emotional Money Triggers workshop for the past 2 years now. Why do you
Mhm.
think it's so important for people to lean into and alchemize their emotional money triggers rather than running away from them?
Mhm. I've in my business, I started to work with very high earning women who were sometimes the one out earning their husbands and their partners, and they're running multiple 6, 7 figure companies. And I started to notice a pattern where the money was starting to shine a light that the money actually wasn't going to solve the wounds of their soul. That if there were some traumas that they hadn't
Mm.
healed, that money does not make that go away. If there's some self-worth stuff coming up, that's driven them to create this massive success, money's not going to make that go away. And so I believe the work that we've been doing these last 2 years in that workshop is so important, because we're almost shining a light on money is so much deeper than buying things or having things. It's like we want to understand what's driving our behavior, so that it's coming from a healthy, whole place, and not from this need to be liked, or this need to belong, or this need to feel worthy or good enough, but it's actually coming from a place of wholeness. And I was surprised when I was working with these women, and some of them were not coming from wholeness. They were coming from wounds. They were coming from, not feeling good enough and doing this because I thought maybe my mom will finally see me. And I was like, whoa, this really shined a light that money can be a magnifier. And yes, we want
They
to
can.
have good financial health. And, I'm one that I want to create wealth and be able to be generous and pass money down. And I want to do it from a whole place because I understand that money is not
Hmm.
going to solve my traumas.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said before, this whole money thing with the mindset, and it's it's like an onion. There are these layers that keep peeling off. And I'm not surprised that this happened, but I wasn't expecting it because I was co-leading the workshop. But during your portion of the workshop, like, I had a major aha moment of something that was under the surface that was blocking me from the next level, which I haven't talked about publicly, and I don't know if I ever will. But I will
Yeah.
say, if you want to purchase the replay, it is
Yeah.
just as powerful on the recording versus live.
Yes.
We're actually going to include that in the show notes. The realizations that you will come to, and we've had repeat buyers who
Yeah.
have purchased it again because they know, okay, I've healed this layer, you know I want to make sure there's nothing else that's blocking me from my next level of success. And I
Yeah.
know from personal experience that this money work is never done, no matter your race, no matter your age, no matter your
Yes.
gender. Like, we've got this money stuff that needs to be healed, and I think it's a lifelong process.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. It's no different than our relationship to anything else, just as we're wanting to improve our relationships and our romantic partnerships, our friendships, or business connections, our relationship with money is important too. And I love that there's women who have come multiple, twice now that we've ran it twice, and each time have new awarenesses and new epiphanies. And to me, that's just how we continue to have a more empowering relationship with money, because we're not ignoring these things. And ignoring and avoidance does not make this stuff go away. And I wish people would understand that. A lot of people think if I just ignore and pretend it's not there, it's like, but it's not going to go away. Just because you
It
ignore
is
it.
not. No. Well, Cassandra, I think you are uniquely qualified because of your biracial experience. And I know you said sometimes you feel like you don't belong in either camp, but I think there's
Mm,
a reason why. I think it's because you were meant to be a bridge
mm,
between these two worlds so
mm.
that you can bring people on both sides of the table together,
Yeah.
because you have that unique experience.
Yeah.
Do you have any parting words of wisdom for us?
Yeah. Just people being more open and curious about people's experiences, even if someone looks different than you, or, checking your judgments and assumptions. Sometimes we can make judgments and assumptions about someone and they're completely false. I remember when I was in college and people was surprised to hear I was biracial. And there's a part of that experience that does give me a different perspective, and so sometimes I can see both sides of the
Mhm.
fence. Sometimes I can see, even like you said, down the middle, the bridge, like what's going to make us more united and
Mhm.
unified. So people just being more open and curious and laying aside any judgments and assumptions and trying to better understand different people's experiences. I think that's how we're going to create new paradigms in a new world, by understanding rather than judging and assuming and criticizing, which is unfortunately what tends to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest. I was a little intimidated when I first reached out to you because, like, you have this aura of confidence and coolness. And I'm like, I don't know that this cool chick is going to want to be my friend. I was like taken back to third grade with me and my little nerdy glasses and,
Oh my gosh. You know, there's this quote
but
from
I'm
Maya
glad I
Angelou.
did.
I'm glad you did too. There's this quote from Maya Angelou, the late Maya Angelou, that I often like to quote. And she says, "We are more alike, my friend, than we are unalike."
Mm,
And so that's what I
so
wish
true.
people would
So
understand.
true.
Like, yeah, there's some experiences that we may not be able to relate to exactly, but there are still parts of the human experience that a lot of people can relate to.
Hmm. Well, Cassandra, thank you so much for being here. It's been an honor to talk with you about this very important subject. So, thank you for being brave enough to have this vulnerable conversation with me. Where is the best place for people to connect with you?
I spend time on Facebook and YouTube and occasionally Instagram. And uh, there's always links provided in my profiles and my bios about ways that people can connect with me if they're interested in working together in that capacity.
Awesome. And we will also have your links in the show notes.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was a really, really interesting conversation. And I want to thank both of you for letting us be a part of it, as a matter of fact, as we listened in. And, the only thing I have to add on this at all, Cassandra, is that one of the things that struck me, and it's one of the things that strikes me a lot, is your response to being bullied as a kid. A lot of I'm always intrigued by people whose response to a really negative, bad set of circumstances sparks something so incredibly powerful and positive. And I'm blown away. And that's where I'm going to
Yeah.
leave it for me. Yeah, I'm blown away, and I think that's fantastic. And I think you should be acknowledged for it. And it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bill.
You bet. And Christine, before we get out of here, two things. First of all, congratulations on the second year anniversary. I was not there at the beginning, but I'm so proud to be here and honored to be with you on your second anniversary.
Yay!
And second, you mentioned it in the course of your conversation, the Wealthy Woman Book Club. For those who are listening who may not be familiar, want to know more about
Yes.
it, how can they find out about it?
Yes, well, you can join both me and Cassandra in the Wealthy Woman Book Club if you want to go to wealthywomanbookclub.com, or you can go to my website, christineluken.com, and right up at the top, you can click on Wealthy Woman Book Club. We would be honored to have you as a part of our community.
Yeah, and just to be clear for those of you who are not familiar with the Wealthy Woman Book Club, you do not have to be wealthy to be a member. Right? Christine, I just want to underscore that.
Yes, the Wealthy Woman Book Club is open to women of all ages, all incomes, all races, all backgrounds. You just have to have the desire to improve and identify with being a wealthy woman in the making. And we don't just want to be wealthy so that we can, carry around Gucci handbags full of money. We want to do it because we want to change the world, truly. So nothing against Gucci handbags, and yes, we might have one. But we're also going to be super generous with that money that's in that handbag.
Exactly.
It's a good group of folks. It's a good group of women, as a matter of fact. And for those of you, Christine, who may be listening or thinking, I'd like to talk to Christine about other matters in terms of like sitting down and maybe getting my finances in order and stuff. How would they reach out to you for that?
Yeah, if you want to go to christineluken.com/apply, you can schedule a call with me and we'll see if we're a good fit to work together.
And I would encourage those of you who are out there thinking maybe to do it because, what you hear is exactly what you get. This is you would enjoy the conversation. For those of you who are listening to this podcast for the first time, who are not subscribers yet, this part's really easy. You don't even have to do much. Just reach out and hit follow. Subscribe yourself. That way, when Christine drops a new episode of her podcast, you're notified, and you can give it a listen. It's really that simple. I would also ask that if you like this podcast, share it with people, tell people about it. Word of mouth promotion is very, very welcome, and it's a very effective tool. Until next time, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen today and remind you that you can go out and make today a great day or not. It is your choice. Use it wisely.
Thank you for listening to the Money is Emotional podcast. To get in touch, visit our website at www.christineluken.com or drop us a line at hello@christineluken.com. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Christine Luken. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing or tax advice. Always seek the advice of your advisor, tax professional, or other qualified financial professional with any questions you may have regarding your personal finances.